Okay, now we've changed our install. Don't forget that we need to put this similar code into our upgrade method. So now if we're at version 1.1, which we've just bumped our module number to, we have to do all that same code where we're creating our database table. And we also have to implement the code that uses those phrases from the database. Now this is kind of ugly because I did it quickly on an airplane, but we look to see if our preference, this is our persistent preference use random phrase, our default is y. If it equals y, what we're doing is we're selecting the count of phrases from our table. Get1 is a handy shortcut for queries that return a single value. Instead of creating a result structure, it just puts it straight into your variable count. We create a random count from that number, a random index, and then select limit is a way of selecting a small set out of a table that could be potentially huge. And you use this also when you're doing paging through data. Rather than querying back all the data in a table and in the PHP sorting through it, you can have the database only take n rows starting at a given offset. So we're just fetching one row starting at our random line number. Now, most selects out of the database are returned in a result structure. So we test to make sure that the result is not false. We do a fetch row, which is an associative retrieval from that. So all the different things that are in the select become indices into our associative array. So we fetch out our phrase by saying phrase equals row of phrase. So that's how we select a random line out of this table. Now, if the user has selected no for random, we just select the one where the value, it's the first one, because when we did our initial creation, we know we inserted something. This would not be safe if we're allowing people to delete records, but again, this is just a quick example. So once we have our phrase, we're assigning, and here we're just doing a straight Smarty assign. We're assigning that phrase to the string phrase, and we're calling our template hello. And as you can see, now we're just displaying our phrase. So it looks identical because there's only one phrase in there. So because there was only one phrase in there, a lot of people wanted to first off, change the preference, because if you recall, we set a default, but we never give the opportunity to change that preference. Secondly, people want to be able to add phrases. So the way we deal with this is we need to create an admin area for the module. We also need to create an input form so people can add phrases. So to create an admin, there's a method in the module called hasAdmin. If you return true, then the module shows up in the admin area. And that's one of those other magic default actions, do action strength, which is default admin. If you don't specify an action and you're in the admin side, that's what comes up. And it's another separated file, default admin. This is what we're adding to the main core of the module here. We have our hasAdmin function, we're returning true. And then there's this function, visible to admin user. This is where we implement some of our permissions. Now, you can use any permission that you see under the permissions tab, or you could have created your own, and you can read up in, for example, the skeleton module or any of the others to see how they do that. But what we do is visible to admin user returns a true or a false, so we're just checking the manage all content. If this is false, it won't show up in the menu for that particular admin. If it's true, it shows up. However, you can't just trust that because they see it, they don't see it in the menu, that they don't figure out that it exists. So immediately after doing our global check, we once again check the permission in our admin file. You can do all sorts of things. You could display a message. You could have it trigger an email. Somebody's trying to do something they're not supposed to be doing. Or you can just bail like this. First thing we do is to check to see if some parameters are set. Well, there's no way those parameters could have been set yet, so it's going to fall through. And here's some of the form API. And I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail because this is quite extensive, but you can create a form start, and this is where that ID parameter that you saw earlier comes in handy. Each time a module instance is created, it has its own unique ID. And this is important so that the parameters, when a form is submitted, know what to go back to. So that if two different modules have parameters by the same name, it knows which one to send, you don't clobber anything. So we're saying basically here we're going to create a form. When somebody submits it, it's going to go back to the same default admin. We're going to create an input preference, which is a checkbox, whether to use the random phrase. Now, checkboxes in HTML are probably the worst thought out thing ever, because if somebody has checked it, it submits a value. If they don't check it, it doesn't submit blank. It just submits nothing with that parameter name. So a common trick is you create a hidden input where you give your no value. So my field is going to be called random. I say no. Then I create the checkbox where if it is checked, the value is y. So that way I'm guaranteed I get a parameter back. I'm passing it a language string so that that's a label for the checkbox. I'm creating a submit button, and I'm going to process a template, which is an admin panel. When the user submits, or the admin submits this form, our field is called random. So that is going to be checked, sanitized, and placed in a params hash. So since it comes back to the same form, what happens is it's going to be set, it's not going to be empty, so we set our preference to that value. We'll set up a message saying, hey, that preference has been set. And I understand I'm going really quickly, and this is getting a little more involved, but bear with me. So the admin panel template, we check to see if a message is defined. If it is defined, we display it using our page message class, which is one of the admin classes, which displays nicely up at the top. We start our form, we pass our input, we pass our submit button. And so this is what it looks like. And I have just submitted it, so it's displaying my message. Okay, so creating a form on the user side is very much like creating a form on the admin side, fortunately. So another big page of ugly code, and it's essentially the same kind of thing. What we're doing is we're testing to see that we're called correctly. If we're creating a form down here, our form is called add, which is our action, so it calls the same file. We're creating a phrase. This time we're using a create input text. So that takes a number of parameters, the ID, the name of the field that gets created, a default value, which we're going to have add phrase here. The length of the field is in display is 40. The maximum length is 255. Again, I'm not going to go into all the details. In this case, we're assigning the mod by reference so that we can go in and do language strings, and then we're processing the add TPL, which looks like this. We got really fancy here in a field set. You know, we're going to be showing a really classy form to our users. Again, we also have a message if it's defined. So we go and add this form to a page. We're going to create a new page, which we're calling phrase add page. Pass the module name and the action, and we view it, and that's the default look. Okay, this is what we've covered in the module API, and I'm being generous. We really have not covered 10%, but Keynote has this really cool pie chart maker, so I'm happy to do this. There are a number of resources available to you. The wiki has a couple of interesting guides for module developers, and the skeleton module is something that it doesn't always keep up exactly with the latest version, but I try and keep it as up to date as I can. And then IRC is always a really good place to ask questions, particularly if you've actually looked into it.